I've been married to Jessica for 5 years. We had what I thought was a solid relationship, built on love, trust, and mutual respect, or so I believed. Jessica was beautiful, ambitious, and successful. She worked as a marketing executive while I dabbled in financial trading. We lived in a comfortable suburban home, and our lives seemed picture perfect until the signs started to show. It started subtly at first. Jessica began coming home late from work more often, claiming she was swamped with projects. I shrugged it off, thinking it was just the demands of her job. But then came the little things, her phone buzzing incessantly with texts, which she would quickly silence whenever I walked into the room. The scent of unfamiliar cologne lingered on her clothes, and she suddenly had a new circle of friends, one that I didn't recognize. One night I stayed up late, hoping to surprise her with a homemade dinner. As I was stirring the pasta, I heard her laughing outside. I peeked through the window and saw her talking animatedly to a guy I didn't know. He had his arm around her casually, and they shared a laugh that sent a pang of jealousy and suspicion through me. I convinced myself that I was just being paranoid, but the seed of doubt was planted. The real turning point came a few weeks later. I had been invited to a poker night at a friend's house. While playing, I won a decent sum of money, something Jessica and I could really use. I decided to surprise her with the good news as soon as I got home. However, when I walked through the door, I found Jessica in our bedroom, phone in hand, whispering. She quickly hung up and put on her usual innocent face when I walked in. There was something off about her demeanor, something I couldn't quite place. After that, I became obsessed. I began to notice every little thing. Jessica's changing wardrobe, her insistence on going out without me, and her late-night calls became impossible to ignore. One evening, I decided to check her phone while she was in the shower. I felt guilty doing it, but the need to know overwhelmed me. I found texts between her and a man named Mike, who I later discovered was the owner of a local casino. The messages were flirty at best, graphic. At worst, my heart raced as I read, each message confirming my worst fears. The confrontation was inevitable. That night when she returned from a supposed work event, I confronted her. I threw the phone on the table, my hands shaking. "Who is Mike?" I demanded, my voice barely containing the anger and hurt. Jessica's face turned pale and her defenses went up immediately. "What are you talking about? You're being ridiculous," she snapped, her bitchy attitude surfacing as she tried to downplay the situation. But I wasn't having it. I laid it all out, the texts, my suspicions, everything. Instead of breaking down, she started spinning a web of lies, claiming that Mike was just a business contact, that I was overreacting, and even suggested I was the one with trust issues. It was infuriating. I felt like I was talking to a wall, and every excuse she fed me felt like a knife through my heart. The emotional impact of that night was overwhelming. I swung from disbelief to anger and then, strangely enough, to a deep sadness. I realized I was not only mourning the loss of fidelity, but also the loss of the future I had envisioned for us. I loved her deeply, but I was done being the fool. That realization sparked something in me, a quiet resolve. I was not going to be the one left holding the bag. I started thinking about my next steps. Should I confront her again? Should I forgive her? Or should I take control of the situation in a completely different way? My mind raced with possibilities, and as I lay awake that night, I knew I had to make a choice. I could either let this destroy me, or I could take charge and get my power back. What I decided next would change everything. As I lay in bed that night, the weight of betrayal pressing down on me, I began to formulate a plan. I knew I had to turn the tables on Jessica. I didn't want to be the victim. I wanted to regain control over my life, and I would do it in a way that would leave a mark. Revenge, as they say, is a dish best served cold, and I was more than ready to cook. The next morning, I woke up with a newfound sense of clarity. I decided to gather more evidence of Jessica's deceit. I became a shadow in my own home, observing her every move. I took mental notes of her routines, her phone habits, and her excuses. I played the role of the oblivious husband while plotting my course of action. It was a strange dichotomy, feeling both like a husband and a detective at the same time. Jessica continued to go out, often claiming she was meeting friends for drinks or working late. I started to keep track of her schedule and even followed her a couple of times just to confirm my suspicions. Each time she ended up at the casino, laughing and flirting with Mike. It felt like a personal betrayal every time I saw her with him, and I liked it less and less. But I couldn't act yet. I needed to accumulate more proof to ensure my plan would hit hard. A week later, I had an opportunity to gather the final piece of the puzzle. It was a Friday, and Jessica had left for what she claimed was a work dinner. I seized the chance to head to the casino myself. I dressed sharply, wanting to blend in but also looking good in case I ran into her. When I arrived, I quickly scanned the casino floor and spotted her in the lounge area, sipping a cocktail and laughing with Mike. I sat at a nearby table trying to appear inconspicuous while taking in the scene. They were touching, leaning in close to each other, everything I had feared and then some. It was infuriating to see her act so shamelessly. I snapped a couple of photos with my phone, capturing the intimacy of their interaction. Each click of the camera felt like a victory, a step closer to the revenge I was plotting. As if on cue, fortune struck. I struck up a conversation with a dealer at one of the poker tables, casually mentioning how my wife was into the casino scene. The dealer, friendly and chatty, ended up revealing that Mike was notorious for his affairs. His reputation was well known among the staff. He always has a new flavor of the week, the dealer said with a knowing smile. I clenched my fists. Jessica was just another notch on his belt. I decided it was time to execute my plan. I returned home that night feeling a mix of adrenaline and dread. I had everything I needed, proof of her infidelity and a new understanding of the man she was involved with. I knew I could crush her financially. It was time to leverage my winnings and hit her where it hurt the most. The next day, I went to the bank and withdrew all my winnings from the previous poker night. It wasn't a huge amount, but enough to make a statement. I also began to clear out my own bank accounts, transferring funds into a new account under my name only. Jessica had always considered herself the breadwinner, and I wanted to take that power away from her. I wanted her to feel the consequences of her actions. That evening, I decided to confront her again. Jessica returned home, and I could tell something was off. She looked nervous, like a deer caught in headlights. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. "We need to talk," I said, my tone calm but firm. She immediately went on the defensive, claiming she had been busy with work. I cut her off. "I know about Mike," I said, my voice steady. "I know about your affair, and I have proof." I pulled out my phone, showing her the photos I took at the casino. Her face went pale, the color draining from her cheeks. "What the hell is this?" she stammered, her voice rising in pitch. I watched as the facade she had built crumbled, and I felt a small sense of satisfaction wash over me. She had always prided herself on being in control, and now the tables had turned. "Don't play dumb, Jessica. I've seen you with him. I know everything." I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. "And because of your choices, I'm taking my winnings and leaving you with nothing. You don't get to destroy our marriage and walk away unscathed." Her reaction was a mix of anger and desperation. "You're being unreasonable. You can't just throw away everything we built over a little mistake," she shouted, throwing her hands up in frustration. I stood my ground, my heart racing but my resolve unshaken. "This isn't a little mistake. This is a betrayal. You wanted to play with fire, and now you're feeling the burn." I watched as her expressions shifted from anger to shock and finally to regret. She realized I was serious and that there would be consequences. The confrontation felt surreal. It was as if I was watching a movie unfold, and I was both the main character and the spectator. I knew I had crossed a line, but I didn't care. The emotional impact of her betrayal was still raw, but I was determined to make her understand the gravity of what she had done. Eventually, she fell silent, and I could see the gears turning in her mind. I wasn't the man she once thought she could manipulate. I had transformed into someone she didn't recognize, someone willing to fight back. As I stood there, watching the reality of her choices sink in, I felt a strange sense of liberation. I was no longer the victim. I was taking control, and nothing felt better. Now came the hard part, dealing with the aftermath. I had made my choice, and I couldn't go back. As I watched Jessica's world begin to unravel, I knew I had set my path. The next steps would be crucial, and I had to be strategic about how I moved forward. I was determined to reclaim my dignity and ensure she understood the consequences of her betrayal. After that confrontation, the air between Jessica and me was thick with tension. It felt like walking on eggshells, but I had made my intentions clear. I was no longer willing to be the man she took for granted. I could see that she was trying to gauge my resolve, perhaps even craft a plan to win me back, but I wasn't falling for it. In the days that followed, Jessica made several attempts to talk things through. She called me unreasonable, overdramatic, and even accused me of overreacting. But nothing she said mattered. I had seen through her manipulative games, and I knew better than to get sucked back into her charm. I would not let her twist this around to make me feel guilty for wanting respect and fidelity. One afternoon, as I was sitting in the living room going over finances, making sure I had everything in order for our inevitable separation, Jessica barged in with tears in her eyes. She had put on an act, the kind that used to work on me, but I was no longer fooled. "I'm sorry," she started, her voice shaky. "I made a mistake, but we can fix this. Let's go to couples therapy. I'll do anything you want, just please don't leave me." I listened to her pleas, but my heart felt cold. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't just about fixing things. You broke my trust, and trust is the foundation of any relationship. You shattered it." I tried to speak calmly, but I could feel the anger bubbling beneath the surface. "Please," she whimpered, her voice becoming desperate. "I love you, I can change, just give me another chance." Her plea felt hollow. I had heard it all before. She had promised to change in the past, but clearly those changes never materialized. This was just another round of her trying to manipulate me into feeling sorry for her. I took a deep breath, trying to remain composed. I had to stay focused on my goal. Financial separation would be my next step. "I've already made my decision, Jessica. I'm moving forward with my life, with or without you. I'm done playing the role of the fool." Her face turned to a mixture of anger and disbelief, and she lunged at me, grabbing my arms. "You can't just throw away our marriage. You'll regret this." I pushed her away gently but firmly. "You made your choice the moment you decided to cheat. I'm not going to be the one who suffers for it." After that, things escalated. Jessica had become increasingly erratic and desperate. She started showing up at my workplace, trying to approach my colleagues and plead her case in front of them. I felt embarrassed, and I didn't want to be seen as the victim, even though that's exactly what I felt like. I decided it was time to cut her off completely. I changed the locks on the house and stopped answering her calls. If she wanted to play games, then I would make sure she was left out of the loop. I went through our shared accounts and began the painful process of disentangling our finances. It was difficult to see everything we had built together being dismantled, but it was necessary. I opened a new account and made sure to safeguard my winnings. Jessica had always taken pride in her financial independence, but now she would face the reality of her actions. Slowly but surely, I began to feel the weight lifting off my shoulders. I was reclaiming my life. I started going out more often with friends, enjoying nights out where I could laugh and share stories without worrying about Jessica's presence. I felt a sense of freedom. I was no longer tethered to the emotional roller coaster that had defined our marriage. A couple of weeks later, I received a letter in the mail from Jessica. It was a formal request for a divorce. The irony was not lost on me. Here she was, the one who had cheated, now wanting to end our marriage on her terms. I felt a surge of satisfaction. I had taken control of the situation, and she was reacting to it. I consulted a lawyer to help me navigate the divorce process. I had to ensure that I was protected legally and financially. I made it clear that I wanted a fair division of assets, but also wanted to make sure Jessica wouldn't walk away from this unscathed. I felt a sense of empowerment as I took these steps, each legal document a testament to my decision to reclaim my life and dignity. The emotional toll of the divorce process wasn't lost on me, though. There were moments of sadness when I thought about the love we once had. I would reminisce about the good times we shared, but they were overshadowed by the betrayal. I realized I was grieving not just for the marriage, but for the future I thought we would have. During this time, I also began investing my winnings wisely. I started engaging with new interests and hobbies that brought me joy. I picked up golfing and even joined a local league. I focused on self-improvement, reading books about emotional resilience and financial independence. I was determined not to let Jessica's betrayal define me. As the weeks turned into months, the dust began to settle. I felt a new sense of clarity in my life. I was no longer the naive husband who would accept empty promises. I had learned my lessons the hard way. Reflecting on everything that had transpired, I felt ready to move on. I had faced betrayal, but it would not break me. With the divorce proceedings underway, I reassured myself that I was taking the necessary steps to reclaim my freedom. I was grateful for the lessons learned through this experience and hopeful for the future ahead. I had transformed from a victim into a man with purpose, determined to build a life that was truly mine. Little did I know that Jessica had more tricks up her sleeve, and the final act of this drama was yet to unfold. I remained vigilant, knowing that in the game of love and betrayal, I had to be prepared for anything. Just when I thought everything was beginning to settle down, Jessica pulled one last stunt that rocked my world once again. I was at work, deep into a project that had my full attention when I received a call from my lawyer. "You need to come into the office right away," he said, his voice grave. My stomach dropped. I had a sinking feeling that Jessica had something up her sleeve. When I arrived at the law office, I found my lawyer packing nervously. "We need to talk about Jessica's latest move," he began, looking more serious than I had ever seen him. "She's filed for temporary spousal support." My heart raced at the thought. I had anticipated some level of financial pushback from her, but this was unexpectedly aggressive. "What? She's the one who cheated. How does she even think she can ask for support?" I shot back, disbelief washing over me. My lawyer explained that Jessica claimed she was unable to support herself since I had taken control of our finances. She painted a picture of herself as the victim, claiming that I had left her high and dry. I felt a surge of irritation as I realized her manipulative tendencies hadn't changed at all. She was still trying to play the victim card, hoping to gain sympathy from the court. "We need to prepare a solid defense," my lawyer said. "We'll provide evidence of her infidelity, as well as your financial contributions to the household." I nodded grimly, feeling an intense mix of anger and determination. I would not let her twist the narrative in her favor. Over the following days, I gathered everything I could to counter her claims. I compiled evidence of our financial history, highlighting how I had contributed significantly to our lifestyle while she was out chasing thrills at the casino. I documented every penny I had invested in our joint accounts, every shared expense I had covered, and every dollar she had taken for granted. I was not going to let Jessica rewrite the story of our relationship. The day of the hearing arrived and I felt a whirlwind of emotions. I had prepared myself for this moment, but I couldn't shake the nerves. As I stepped into the courtroom, I saw Jessica sitting at the plaintiff's table, her demeanor calm and collected, but I could see the twitching in her hand. She was attempting to put on a brave face, but deep down, I knew she was feeling the pressure. The judge entered and the proceedings began. My lawyer presented our case first, detailing the evidence of Jessica's infidelity and my financial contributions. He emphasized how Jessica's actions had directly led to the dissolution of our marriage and how it was unjust for her to ask for support after her betrayal. I watched as the judge listened carefully, his brow furrowing in thought. Then it was Jessica's turn. She stood up, and I braced myself for the performance of a lifetime. She painted herself as a martyr, claiming that I had always been controlling and that I had sabotaged her career by taking charge of our finances. She shed a few tears and played the victim convincingly, and I could see the judge's expression soften. It was infuriating to watch her spin lies so effortlessly, but I wasn't going to let her get away with it. When my lawyer had the chance to cross-examine her, he expertly picked apart her claims. He brought up the evidence of her affair, replaying the texts and photos I had submitted. I watched as Jessica squirmed on the stand, her confident facade cracking under the pressure. It felt empowering to see her revealed for who she really was, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. After hours of tense back and forth, the judge called for recess. As we stepped out of the courtroom, I felt the adrenaline coursing through me. I was nervous but hopeful. I had stood my ground and refused to let her manipulate the situation. My lawyer was optimistic, urging me to remain confident. "Remember, you have the truth on your side," he said, encouraging me. "Just stay composed and we'll get through this." When we returned to the courtroom, the judge delivered his ruling. I held my breath as he spoke, and when he announced that he was denying Jessica's request for temporary spousal support, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. The look on Jessica's face was priceless. Her mouth fell open in disbelief as she processed what had just happened. She was furious, and I could see her anger boiling beneath the surface. As the hearing concluded, I took my time walking out of the courtroom, savoring the victory. I had stood up to her and the judge had seen through her manipulations. It felt like a watershed moment for me, a final break from the chains of our toxic relationship. I was reclaiming my life piece by piece, but the aftermath of the court ruling didn't last long before Jessica struck again. She reached out to me, trying to corner me emotionally. "You think you've won, don't you?" she said, bitterness lacing her words. "This isn't over." I responded calmly, "What more do you want, Jessica? You've made your choices." She scoffed, her anger palpable. "You'll regret this. You'll see how much I can make your life a living hell." Her threats didn't faze me. I knew I had the upper hand now, and I wouldn't let her scare me. In the days that followed, I began to notice more signs of her desperation. Jessica started showing up at places I frequented, unannounced. She attempted to catch me off guard, trying to engage in conversation, but I remained steadfast. I didn't want to be pulled back into her games. It felt like she was grasping at straws, desperate to regain some control over the situation. The more I focused on my own life, the more I realized how toxic our relationship had been. I had allowed her manipulation to dictate my happiness for far too long. I focused on building a new routine, spending time with friends who supported me, and enjoying life without fear of betrayal. I even turned my attention to new interests, exploring hobbies that I had set aside while being married. I started dating again, cautiously but optimistically. Meeting new people felt liberating. It was refreshing to engage with women who didn't have a hidden agenda, who valued honesty and respect. However, Jessica wasn't done just yet. She had been plotting her next move, and I was about to find out just how far she was willing to go to regain her power. I kept my guard up, knowing that I had to remain vigilant in the face of her manipulations. The final act of this drama was still looming, and I was prepared to face whatever she had in store. I was determined to maintain my newfound freedom and never let her ensnare me again. Just when I thought I had emerged from the storm, Jessica struck again with a calculated move that left me reeling. A few weeks after the court ruling, I was sitting at a cafe downtown, enjoying a quiet moment with a new date, Sarah. We had been hitting it off, and I felt a sense of normalcy returning to my life. Just as I was laughing at one of Sarah's jokes, my phone buzzed with a text. It was a message from my lawyer. "You need to come to the office immediately. Jessica is filing for something serious." My heart dropped. I excused myself from the table, feeling a wave of anxiety wash over me. I hurried to the law office, my mind racing with possibilities. What could she possibly want now? When I arrived, my lawyer greeted me with a serious expression. "She's filed for a restraining order against you," he said grimly. "She claims you've been harassing her and threatening her well-being." I felt a cold chill run down my spine. This was a new low even for her. "Harassing her? Are you kidding me?" I replied incredulously. "I haven't even spoken to her since the hearing." My lawyer nodded in sympathy but remained focused. "We need to prepare a defense. The court takes these claims very seriously, and if she presents herself convincingly, it could complicate your case even further." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Jessica was trying to paint me as the villain in a story where she was the indisputable victim. It was infuriating to think that she was willing to manipulate the legal system to her advantage. I steeled myself, knowing I had to respond wisely. Knowing how manipulative she could be, I started documenting everything. the dates and times of her calls, the texts I had sent, the interactions we had. I set my phone to record any interactions I had with her, just in case. I wanted to make sure I had solid proof of her lies. The day of the court hearing arrived, and I felt a mix of anxiety and determination. I walked into the courtroom with my lawyer, pushing aside the anger and focusing on the facts. Jessica was there, looking deceptively innocent in her oversized sweater, her hair cascading down as she played the part of the distressed damsel. When the judge entered, I sat up straight, ready to defend myself. Jessica's lawyer opened the case, presenting her fabricated narrative of me being aggressive and threatening. She claimed that I had sent her threatening messages and that I had been lurking around places she frequented. I felt anger boiling within me as I listened to her lies, but I knew I had to keep my composure. When it was finally my turn to speak, I presented my evidence, text conversations showing I had limited contact and had made no threats whatsoever. I could see the judge's expression shift as he reviewed my documents. Then Jessica took the stand, and I braced myself for the performance of a lifetime. She recounted tales of alleged harassment in a shaky voice, tears brimming in her eyes. I could see the judge's sympathy as she described how terrified she was, but I wasn't going to let her manipulate the situation this time. When my lawyer cross-examined her, he brought up inconsistencies in her story. You claim to be in fear for your safety, yet you have no concrete evidence of harassment, he pointed out. In fact, you've contacted him multiple times without any signs of fear. I watched as the facade crumbled, her confidence wavering under the weight of her own fabrications. After what felt like an eternity, the judge called for a recess. As I stepped outside the courtroom, I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me. I couldn't shake the feeling of disbelief that Jessica would go so far as to try and ruin my life with baseless claims. When we returned, the judge made his ruling. He denied Jessica's request for a restraining order, stating that there was insufficient evidence to support her claims. I felt a rush of relief, but I also knew that Jessica wouldn't take this lightly. She was cornered now, and cornered animals often attack. In the days following the court ruling, I prepared for the inevitable backlash. Jessica began reaching out to friends and colleagues, spinning her narrative of victimhood and painting me as the villain. I heard rumors of her reaching out to mutual friends, attempting to garner sympathy. It was frustrating, but I reminded myself that I had the truth on my side. Then one evening I received a call from my friend Alex. "Hey man, I just wanted to give you a heads up," he said, his voice serious. "Jessica has been telling people that you're the one who's unstable and that she's terrified of you." My blood boiled. Here she was, trying to destroy my reputation to deflect attention from her actions. "Thanks for the heads up, but let her talk," I replied, trying to keep my cool. "I know the truth, and I'm not going to let her drag me down." I realized then that this was not just a battle over finances or a marriage gone wrong. It was a fight for my reputation and my peace of mind. I was done being a pawn in her game. I had to take a stand and make it clear that I wouldn't allow her to manipulate the narrative any longer. With that resolve, I decided to take proactive steps. I reached out to friends and family, sharing my side of the story, evidence my experience. I wanted to ensure that they understood what was really happening. I couldn't let Jessica's lies spread unchecked. I put everything into documenting my interactions, keeping records of her manipulations and being transparent with those around me. As I stood up for myself, I discovered a newfound strength. I was no longer the man who would simply accept the blame for someone else's actions. I was reclaiming my narrative, and it felt freeing. Slowly but surely, friends began to see through Jessica's facade. They reached out to me, offering their support and standing by my side. But I knew this was only one battle in a long war. Jessica would not go down quietly. The final act of this drama was still unfolding, and I had to remain vigilant. I was prepared for her next move, ready to face whatever she threw my way. I had fought too hard to let her destroy my life, and I was determined to emerge victorious from this twisted game. Little did I know, Jessica had won. Last card to play, and it would change everything. As I prepared for the next phase of this exhausting ordeal, I received a call from my lawyer that jolted me. "You need to come in," he said, a sense of urgency in his tone. I raced over, my heart pounding with anxiety. What could Jessica possibly want now? Had she finally lost it completely? When I arrived at the office, my lawyer was waiting for me with a grim expression. "Jessica has filed a lawsuit against you for emotional distress," he explained. "Claims that your actions have caused her significant psychological damage." I was taken aback. "Emotional distress? Are you serious?" I couldn't believe the audacity she had to claim that I was the one causing her distress when it was she who had betrayed our marriage, playing with my heart and our lives like it was a game. My lawyer continued, "This could complicate the divorce proceedings further. She's trying to position herself as the victim, and if she plays this right, it could lead to serious consequences." I felt a mix of anger and frustration as I internalized the gravity of the situation. Here I was trying to move on with my life, and she was dragging me back into her web of lies and deceit. Determined not to let her succeed, I gathered every shred of evidence I had: the texts, the emails, the photographs, and even testimonies from friends who had seen her manipulation firsthand. I was no longer going to let her control the narrative. I was armed with the truth, and I was ready to fight back. The court date arrived, and I walked into the courtroom feeling a mixture of dread and determination. I took a deep breath, focusing on the facts rather than my emotions. Jessica was there, and I could see the confidence radiating from her as she prepared to present her case. She had always been good at playing the victim, and I knew she would do everything in her power to convince the judge of her fabricated story. As the proceedings began, my lawyer presented my side of the story: how I had been the one wronged, how Jessica had betrayed our marriage, and how her claims of emotional distress were simply a ploy to manipulate the court. I listened intently as my lawyer detailed the evidence against her, highlighting her history of deceit. Then it was Jessica's turn to take the stand. She launched into her performance, recounting tales of her alleged suffering since the divorce proceedings began. Tears streamed down her face as she described the sleepless nights and anxiety she claimed I had caused her. I felt my blood boil as she painted me as the villain, but I reminded myself to remain calm. I had the evidence on my side. When it was time for cross-examination, my lawyer was relentless. He asked her about her actions that led to the breakdown of our marriage, pointing out the inconsistencies in her story. Each time she tried to twist the truth, he was there to set the record straight. I watched as her confidence faltered and doubt crept into her demeanor. Finally, he brought up her affair with Mike, showing the judge the texts that revealed her betrayal. The color drained from her face as the evidence was laid bare for all to see. I felt a rush of satisfaction as I witnessed her facade crumble. After a tense couple of hours, the judge gathered his notes and made a ruling. He denied Jessica's claims of emotional distress, stating that her actions had been the primary cause of the distress in our marriage. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Justice had prevailed, and I had finally stood up to her manipulations. As we left the courtroom, I felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I knew that this was not just a victory in court. It was a turning point in my life. I had taken control of my narrative and fought back against the lies Jessica had spun. But the aftermath still loomed ahead. I knew she would not take this loss gracefully. I braced myself for whatever she had planned next. I focused on my life, my new relationship with Sarah, and the friendships I was rebuilding. I was finally moving on, determined not to let Jessica pull me back into her chaos. As weeks turned into months, Jessica's attempts to reach out dwindled. She seemed to retreat into her own world, perhaps realizing that her manipulations were no longer effective. I continued to live my life, embracing the changes I had made and focusing on my own happiness. In time, I learned to forgive myself for the years I had spent in that toxic relationship. I had allowed love to blind me to the truth, but I was no longer that person. I had grown stronger, more resilient. As I savored every moment of my newfound freedom, I reflected on the lessons this tumultuous experience had taught me. For anyone who finds themselves in a similar situation, my advice is simple: Don't let someone else's betrayal define you. Take control of your narrative, rise above the lies, and surround yourself with those who lift you up. Life is too short to be pulled into someone else's dark games. As I moved forward, I committed to living authentically and embracing the beauty that life had to offer. I was ready for new adventures, new relationships, and a future that was truly mine. With every step I took, I left behind the betrayal and the pain, forging a path toward a brighter tomorrow. I had emerged from the fire, and I was ready to soar.